this computer. Right. So share screen. So hi to everybody. Hopefully you can all see this. What I want to do is just go over a quick presentation on what I think we are planning to do at Christchurch, and then literally give an opportunity for some questions and for some clarifications at the end. So I'd like to go through the whole thing first, and then I'm very happy to take questions one at a time when we can towards the end. So in this time, I want to look at this whole kind of thing. We've done some listening, and we now need to think about strategic planning looking ahead. And this, just to say, for the members of the PCC and anybody else who wants it, you will be able to get paper versions of this. We will make sure that this gets printed fully for everybody. So let me make a start. So what I want to do is just basically go through what is our developmental plans? What have we heard in terms of some of the listening that we need to attend to? I want to give you some of the kind of headlines from the work that we heard from Jane Perry. I want to talk very, very briefly about the 4 identified priority areas that I think we need to think about. And then we need to think about, okay, so given that we've got these 4 identified priority areas, how then are we going to meet those needs or respond to those needs? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea of building community and social capital, which is when we need to talk about new monasticism. And then talk a little bit lessons learned when thinking about new monasticism, and take questions at the end. So hopefully that will be clear. So, and I'll try to explain this so that Janet, who can't see this, although Janet's got a printed copy of this, so I'm just going to be talking to that, Janet, so you can hear what I'm saying. The first thing that we need to say is all this planning is not for just the short term. You know, what we're talking about is long-term planning. It isn't just because I'm here, but actually what we're talking about is joining. If you could please make sure your microphones are on mute, please, otherwise we're going to get feedback. This is about collaboratively working with the PCC, the need of a BMO, which I'll explain a bit later. It will also be about working collaboratively with Marshall's, the Marshall's Charity, which are our patrons, and also the diocese and the diocesan structures as well. So this is about long-term planning, okay? So what are some of the headlines that we've heard from Jane Perry's research, which we've already heard presented? Well, this, I think, is a really helpful diagram. We're talking about kind of, I think, 3 to 4 different groups, some of which are in the report, some of them are not. The first group, I think, are those who live, well, two groups live in the parish. Those are people who live on some of the social estates and some of the other housing, but also some of the new housing down by the river. And how we respond to these groups. Some of those we've got connections through from the members who attend the Sunday morning congregation, and many that we do not have any connection at all. The other group that we need to attend to are those who work in the area in different sort of contexts. Some of those are in small creative companies, some of them working in hotels, some for working in the public sector, and some working for large corporates. So how do we respond to the mission and spiritual needs? And there seems to be 4 main themes that are affecting everybody. And that's the issue around well-being and mental health. For those who are working in the area and those who are also living and working in the area, there's pressures around the pressures of working. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in this kind of post-COVID situation that's developing. We're seeing continued change and a lot of insecurity and uncertainty around continued change. And again, the COVID-19 has exacerbated that. And we're seeing, as in many parts of London, kind of social fragmentation and isolation. We remember this area south of Blackfriars Bridge feels like an in-between place in the sense that it's stuck between a strong identity at Waterloo and a strong identity in Blackfriars. And actually we are stuck in the middle of that in trying to, in an area that is a bit of a central London area, but what doesn't have a coherence about it. So what are the kind of 4 identified areas? Well, you'll see this on this. So on the diagram I've just put up, you'll see on the left-hand side some of the issues that Jane Perry's report identifies. And then you see the kind of the areas that I kind of think we're discerning and need to attend to. And then you'll see that there are the kind of 4 priority areas along with the 5th one around how we're going to meet that. So if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see the kind of priorities around that. It's, as I've said already, the sense of it's a between place. We have a high density of residents and social fragmentation. We have a lot of people who work in the area, and there's going to be a lot of uncertainty about how offices are going to work, how people are going to work post the COVID situation. We see a rapidly changing environment. We see a lot of new hotels. There's a lot of tourists, a lot of footfall of people walking through the area. And also, as I've said, you see that sense of alienation and disempowerment, particularly from those living on some of the social estates. So I think the 4 groups that I think we need to attend to very carefully are, one, around those who work in the population. And we're very aware that in terms of the church, there isn't a connect really with those who work in the area. Secondly, is a total disconnect with those moving into new accommodation down by the river. Also, there's a sense that the church was connected to quite a lot of people who lived in the area, but due to recent happenings, there's been a disconnect. So how do we reconnect with those who used to go to Christchurch as well as people who never did? And fourthly, which is an increasing issue, is about how do we respond, like as many central London churches, to the issue of rough sleepers and the needs of rough sleepers, but particularly what we are hearing with South Bank churches around issues around support and resettlement. So the key areas and how we respond to that then is, one, how do we then develop Christchurch to be a safe and sustainable hub, a place where we think about worship, mission and community? How then do we respond to those who work in the area? How can we develop new activities, new opportunities of serving the spiritual and missional needs and thinking about well-being, particularly of those who work in the area? Thirdly, how do we reconnect to those who either have lived in the area for a long time and disconnected to the church, those who've left the church for whatever reasons, and for those moving into the area that have no connection to the church? How do we then respond to the needs of the rough sleepers, as I've said? And then how do we develop a sense of community at Christchurch? I mean, in the first 4 priority areas you've heard there, how do we then build a team to do it? Because we are a very small, the Sunday morning community is very small. What we've got going on Sunday evening is very nascent. So how do we build a team building in for the future to build a healthy expression of ecclesial community to serve all these needs at Christchurch, Southwark? So let me just go through each of those in points. So when we think about now creating a safe space and a sustainable hub, how do we reconnect and put church back on the map and as a space to want to go and participate in? Well, firstly, I'm pleased to say that we have set up a website. It took a little while to get that going, and that is happening. And we have started to integrate social media. I'm quite pleased with the work that Tobias, John and I have been doing on social media, where we've been trying to integrate things between YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Zoom. So that's been really good. And we want to develop that more. I'm really pleased that we've been able to integrate what's going on in the hall, many of which is around issues of spirituality, well-being and community, are now much more integrated into that website. Now there's a lot to do. The church space is not a particularly conducive space to come and pray, and at times not a very safe place. Also, we need to develop the identity of what we're trying to do. At the moment, we've got one notice board, which looks a bit sad. So we've got to think about communications. Really pleased to say that Marshals are going to be paying quite a lot of money, around about 70k, to do some work on repainting the building. So we're just going through a faculty to be able to do that. And we do need to work with, I think, Marshals to think about how do we develop the Christchurch Gardens and Park to be a much safer place. So there's the website. Most of you have hopefully seen it. And we've already started to push the focus on well-being and spirituality. Hopefully you've had time to have a look at that website, but I'm really quite pleased with the work that we've already been able to do on that. And that gives you a bit of an idea. So we've been able to integrate those who've been long-standing users of the hall, plus some new ones. So we've got a lot going on in terms of well-being groups. We are working with new groups to do with dance. We are also working with music and performance. and we have a historic connection with yoga groups and martial arts. And also within that, you'll see that we've integrated a couple of things. Firstly, our weekly new silent meditation group aimed at de-stressing those who are feeling stressed. And we've also going to restart our work with kind of working with the spiritual, not religious, as a form of mission event. So that's integrated fully within the website. So that's the first one. Please notice here, you'll see here that one of the really big challenges that we didn't foresee is the pandemic, which is why stewardship is such an important thing and why we must encourage all of us who see Christchurch as a spiritual home to consider how we can financially support it as well as our time. And we are predicting around about £21,500 shortfall. So that is, within our budget. We have the reserves to cope with that, but we are talking about a £21,500 overspend, which we are trying to address. We're trying to adjust that through stewardship, gift aid, and we will be needing to renew and review what we do in the hall and offices in terms of value for money as well. So it is disappointing, but that's where we are. And I'm pleased to say that we've been able to cope. There's many other churches that are in a far worse situation than us, but we do need to address financial stewardship. So that's the first one. Secondly, how to respond to the needs of those who work in the area. So this is where I think John's role is going to be really key with us. Starting to think about how do we reconnect the firms in the area. So we will, the ones that we historically do Christmas carol services for, we'll start with them, but we need to build up new relationships, and not just about carol services once a year, but how can we engage with staff on the issue of well-being and spirituality. So that's drawing on what we've already started, but I think there'll be new things that we need to think about. And one of the areas I'm very keen to explore is developing a co-working space. How do we can draw people who work into, there's more life that's going on in the church building. So at the moment, what was that space? That was a side chapel at one stage. There was also an office at one stage, and it became a little bit of a cafe at one stage. I would like to develop that as a co-working space. That creates an income for the church, but also an opportunity to draw people who work in the area into the building. I'm also very keen to start developing spiritual, not religious, and at some point it might be that we think about having a small bookshop to kind of promote spirituality as well for those around well-being and those who work in the area. So that's the second group. The third group, that's about how do we grow new as well as existing congregations. So the first thing I really want to do is develop the Sunday morning service. So at some point with this pandemic, we would really like to hold a back to church Sunday and have a party after that for those who used to come and don't, as well as trying to make a connection with those who live locally who might want to come. So that's the Sunday morning service. We want to develop the Sunday evening service now that that's weekly, to develop those who are particularly looking for more of a contemplative approach to Christianity. And we do need to think about what's going on during the week. And as you'll know, we've started some morning and evening prayers to try and develop a rhythm of life there. So that's the third group, about those who live in the area. Fourthly, you've heard me talk about it very briefly, but we are part of the conversation with South Bank churches, exploring how we support rough sleepers now with this pandemic and potentially an increase of unemployment on the order of between 40 and 50% increase. We're going to see a lot more people on the streets. So how do we, and I don't think it's our responsibility to duplicate what is done well at St. John's and at St. George's, which got all sorts of things with food banks and all sorts of stuff to do with food programs, that sort of thing. The need, I think we're hearing, is around mentoring and supporting those who are being resettled and then have ended up really isolated. So how do we create opportunities for those who have been resettled, maybe in our area or near to our parish, who therefore need have support? So we need to think about how we participate to do that. And we will keep going with our robes project every year, and we will be committing to do that in 2021 as we did for 2020. So how do we build on these things? Well, none of this could we do within our available resources at the moment. So we do need to develop a team. I'm really pleased we've started with John and Tobias. I'll say a bit more about that in a minute, but we also need to expand that. And that's why we need to develop some form of ecclesial community at Christ Church that builds on the two congregations on Sundays, but also goes much deeper. And that is why I want to explore the possibility of a new monastic community, starting hopefully in September as a dispersed group of people who feel called to live a rhythm of life based at Christ Church, both dispersed. And then hopefully maybe next year start thinking about how we could work with marshals to develop a residential community opportunity for those to live in the parish and give time to various projects. So that's in the middle of a pandemic, we can't really make any plans about that yet. But I am very keen to develop what could be called the John Marshall New Monastic Community based at Christ Church. So it's great to have John. Just to remind you, John will be with us for a couple of years as our pioneer curate, and he'll be giving time not only to learn on the job, but also to help develop some new mission initiatives that he will lead on. We've also got Brother Tobias with us from the Anglican Franciscans, who is already being given time, and we look forward to him also helping us as we seek to develop stuff in the area as well. So that's the initial team. But we need to develop that much further, and we need much more lay involvement to be able to do that, to be able to listen to our post-COVID context, because we have no idea what's going to happen after all of this, and we hope that people will return to use the offices, but there's no guarantee about that. And we do need to think about what mission events will be relevant as we seek to reach out to those who live and work in the area. So, what do we know about new monasticism? Well, firstly, just so you know, my background has been about developing forms of community, both dispersed and residential, to then create social capital, as in people giving time to develop projects. Those who know me well will know that I was very involved in the Moot community, which has set up an arts cafe at St Mary Aldermary in the City of London, which has become a massive success. When I was in Peckham, in St Luke's Camberwell in Peckham, the Wellspring community we developed, which then created all sorts of new projects to try and help those living in Peckham, particularly those struggling with no food. So that's what I did. So what was great about developing the Wellspring community in the parish of St Luke's Camberwell in Peckham is it created the social capital then to make lots of things happen. It helped regenerate the Sunday morning service. It created opportunities to work with me to support spiritual, not religious discussion groups. All sorts of things about trying to reach the unchurched. And as I said, help develop what was known as the Peckham Pantry, which was a cheap food shop, which now happens every single Wednesday and has been a massive success. So successful that the Mayor of London went to visit it last year. So what do I mean by new monasticism? Well, here's a quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who's one of the kind of visionaries around new monasticism, when he said, "The restoration of the church must surely depend on a new kind of monasticism, which has nothing in common with the old, but a life of uncompromising discipleship, following Christ according to the Sermon on the Mount. I believe the time has come to gather people together to do this." So he was really important in the sense that he helped develop a radical form of community which happened in the Second World War to respond to the takeover of the Lutheran Church by fascists, and then modeled a much deeper way of understanding the importance of church. So what's to say about new monasticism? Well, very briefly, firstly, it's a terrible term. It makes it sound like we're trying to re-monk the church or got some sort of idea of some sort of elitist group. Please don't hear that. It's about trying to draw people together to live a rhythm of life, of prayer, service, and worship of God. So it's not a particularly helpful word, but it's very much focused on prayerful action. Anybody in the parish who wants to be involved in this, they can. It's not going to be exclusive, but it will be an expectation that people will be committing time and to a rhythm of life to be able to do that. But as I say, that'll be open to anybody who really would like to be part of that. Good examples of that, if you didn't know, so at Lambeth Palace, under the Archbishop of Canterbury, is the St Anselm community, which has been really successful in creating a community to support the Archbishop's initiatives. In Leicester Cathedral, there is the Tree of Life New Monastic Community, which is about really serving the Bishop of in Leicester, which is about trying to serve the cathedral to reach out to the spiritual, not religious, with a rhythm of life. And there's lots of parishes that have experimented with new monasticism. One in Ipswich that I know very well, one in Derby. So Ipswich was a parish that was almost dead, and there was a new monastic communities kind of sparked it to new life. In St Thomas's parish in Derby, which is a city centre church, which was literally going to close, it's been kind of held together by a new monastic community. And also in West London, in St Saviour's Church, there's been the Young Franciscans, which is a form of new monasticism, which has gone together to serve, trying to reach out to the kind of young who are not interested in spirituality and not religious, as part of a renewal of a parish. So there's lots of really good examples of new monasticism working within a parish context. So what does that mean? What are some of the advantages? Well, there's, when I worked in Peckham, I was able to do more in 4 years than I was able to do in the previous 12 in a more dispersed community. So if and when we can have a residential community of maybe 4 or 5 people, then that will really spur it, I think, us into being able to do more, because we'll have the capacity to do more. The focus then is on participation. So it's not about, having to be signed up to all sorts of stuff. It's about participating in a rhythm of life. If we look at some of the national statistics, it kind of suggests that, that Christian discipleship really is struggling at the moment, where people don't go very deep with what the Christian faith is about. By having a new monastic focus, we'll then be encouraging much deeper forms of discipleship. And I think it will breathe new life into this parish. Also, which I think is always very, very helpful, there's a great danger within parish ministry that it all becomes a little bit too focused on the rector or the priest in charge. One of the great advantages of new monasticisms is that it reduces dependency on the clergy and much more a sense of being a church community. And it has the proven ability to create communal and social capital, as in having people giving their time to make things happen. So that is a bit of a whistle-stop tour that I'm taking very long to do that. So that gives you some idea about, we have got these quite serious challenges for our parish. There are 4 groups that I do think we need to think about: those who work in the area, those who've lived in the area for some time, those who are moving into the area. There's the sense of trying to connect with those who've left the church for whatever reasons, to talk about where we're going. And I think we do need to think about rough sleepers as well. So that therefore leads us to these 4 major challenges: creating a safe hub at Christ Church Southwark, responding to the needs of those who work in the area, responding to the needs of those who live in the area, responding to some of the needs of the rough sleepers in the area, and then really importantly, building a team so that we can do this well. So that's all I really wanted to say to you, and then give an opportunity now, if I stop the share, to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. So maybe if you would like to ask a question, and we'll take one soon. I hope that made sense. Then maybe just if there's any clarification questions first, and I'll take them first. I hope that made some sense, because I'm aware I went through that really fast.
I have one question.
Janet, go for it.
When you said the building up the team will mean less dependence on the minister or the minister, I'm not too sure what you meant by that.
Well, I meant that, sometimes there's an idea that all the ministry comes from one person, and often that's an expectation. The vicar who works full time will then be the focal point of a particular parish. We know from research that healthy expressions of parishes are when there are a team of people, both lay and ordained, who come together to serve the needs of a parish, not just the vicar of the parish. There's the idea of vicar plus.
Spreading the load.
Yeah, but also different vocations as well. Yeah, so so there are people with different callings to do different roles in terms of the worship mission and community needs of the parish.
Right, thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, Ian, I have a question. I my question is, how much, I mean, this vision that you've presented to us, I have only recently, been co-opted onto the PCC and haven't really been part of the Christchurch family for quite some time. And my question is, how much have the PCC, which I wasn't part of, been part of the reshaping of this vision? And secondly, I'm not quite sure when this piece of work was commissioned, but is there any scope to take into consideration the new, what seemingly is the new world order of whether we're going to go back, the working community around Christchurch is going to go back to what it was?
Very good questions, Lynette. So let me take those in turn. So the first question, the Jane Perry research, which was commissioned in late December, she literally went to most people involved in the church, those who use the hall, and those and also did some of those who work in the area that have no connection to the church. So there was a full consultation about that, and that was compiled into a report. I have talked about where are we going in terms of the strategic response to members of the PCC, so there's been a kind of full presentation in relation to that. So this is a kind of final version of that. In terms of the new situation, you're absolutely right. So this isn't committing to, this must, to a kind of aims and objective approach that it's all got, what I've just said has got to be achieved within 2 years' time. There's got to be a continual re-listening as part of that process. So what we've done are big strokes, but when it comes to the detail about what needs to be achieved by when, there's going to be a need for constant new listening. So part of the approach I hope that we are going to take is a listening and responding. So, when we get to September, October, November, we will be watching to see what business does. I mean, I'm very aware of some of the presentations I've been party to. For example, in the City of London, they are not expecting, there's an expectation 91% of most firms are not going to go back in 2020 and not go back to 2021. So, so we're not going to be able to do a huge amount. So I think we have to watch and see what happens and try to respond to a changing context in central London. So we'll have to, so good question, Lynette. So I think what we've got are broad strokes in terms of those working, those who live in new accommodation in the area, those who are living in some of the established estates, and how do we respond to those needs. So that is the approach that we are going to take, but precisely what we do needs to depend on what works and what doesn't work, and what kind of comes up out of the new situation out in post, and where it's too early to know what that is yet. Does that answer your question, Lynette? Yes,
it does. I mean, what you've said, basically said, I mean, more to the second, your first question was Jane Perry interviewed people, users, and those who probably work in the area, and you kept the PCC up to date on what was going on. And then the second question is, I mean, from what you've said, I presume what you're referring to is the fact that there will be opportunities to review, what Christchurch will be, because the world has changed, and I think we need to be really pragmatic when it comes to that, in factoring the fact that when we look at the buildings around, and as you've rightly said, maybe, this year, 2020, a lot of employees will not come back. But then, moving forward, I think we need to factor in the fact that organizations may resort to a lot of hot desking, and so that would mean a reduced population of workers coming into the area. And as long as we are conscious of that, I think we should be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think so. One of the things I do want to talk about with the PCC is a particular approach to how do you listen and how do you try things out. Yeah. And one of the focus groups I found really interesting that both John and I were at, there was a sense of that I really sensed from one of the focus groups, there was a sense of people wanting to see more visibility of the church, seeing the church really respond to in emerging situations. So and a sense that a desire for Christchurch to contribute more to the local area. I think that, what was great about Christchurch, we got great staff, we've got great resources, we've got great building resources, quite a rare thing in central London. The challenge then is how do we then follow the will of God and seek to develop the church to become a healthy place again, so that it becomes much more lived, because I'm just so aware there is a gap. There's a gap between where many people are and where the church is, that we need to think about how we respond. But yes, that's going to be an ongoing thing, because we still do not know what will central London look like in a post-COVID situation. I don't know what that is yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I've got quite a few people here. Antoinette.
Yeah. As somebody who doesn't live locally, you mentioned the Robes project. Would you mind just saying what that is?
Yes, so no problem, Antoinette. So so basically the Robes project is a rough sleepers initiative where church halls, various parish churches come together to support a charity, which then various parishes use their church halls to accommodate homeless people to then safely sleep in a place that's warm and they are fed. Before I came, there was a collaboration between the cathedral and the cathedral team, and using Christchurch as a basis to do it. So because Christchurch doesn't have many people in terms of its church community, the cathedral helped make something happen. And use resources to do that. And so we'll be committing to do that in 2021. And anybody who wants to be involved in that from Christchurch can be, but that's the Robes project. Any other questions in terms of what I've been saying? Silence. David.
Yeah, Ian, I suppose I guess I've been more involved in the sort of spiritual, not religious events and the meditation. And I suppose the challenge, what's changed for me is whereas I used to be in central London every weekday, I'm now only in a couple of days a week. And I wonder how that translates for many other people as well. But it doesn't mean there's no interest. It's just that if everything's physically on site, it makes it may not be accessible. But I suppose there's things have been online recently, and I wonder whether there's a plan to continue that in addressing in trying to reach certainly people who work occasionally in the area, maybe less frequently than they used to.
Good question, David. So our commitment is to do both and. So we will be seeking to continue to do some of the stuff that we're doing online, particularly the more missional. But we also want to try and do something where there is at some point gathering of a group of people rather than just looking at screens. So if we can do both and is kind of where we are. So one of the things that we're trying to do at the moment is to make that streaming much easier, and about platforms that means that we can actually stream to multiple different platforms at the same time. because John and I have spent quite a lot of time just trying to make sure that everything kind of configures, and it is a bit stressful drawing a lot of social media as well as trying to run something in a particular place. So yes, it's a both and hopefully as technology moves on, we'll find new things that'll help to make that easier. And we also know from research that, you know, roughly around 5% of people who see a thing online and like it at some point will turn up. So that whole approach of having both and is crucial. Yeah. Thank you, David. So yes, I think we'll keep that. And for me, what I think we're hearing in the research, issues around well-being and all the uncertainty of the COVID, it's really important that somehow we as Christians and as a Christian community are engaged with that world and unpacking what Christian spirituality is in the context of secular spirituality. So we, you know, a commitment to that is really important. Yeah. Any other questions? Definite silence. So Harriet, have we got Elizabeth here? Did she come back, or it didn't? Can't see if Elizabeth is here. Don't think she is.
I tried to dial in once or twice, but for some reason it wasn't working.
Okay. Harriet, have someone a member of the existing congregation, and Tobias, if you guys wanted to ask a question, please do. Tobias, did you want to ask a question? Go for it.
Just in terms of your hopes for an kind of initial dispersed community that could kind of grow up around the church, and you know you've put September, which is only a couple of weeks away, and I'm just wondering about timescale, wondering how feasible September is as a potential start date for this, and I don't know. I mean, where you feel that it's at, but yeah.
So I think what we'll be looking for is a group of people who are prepared to enter into a conversation. It's not that we're asking people to suddenly commit to seasonal vows and promises by beginning of September. So it's much more about a group of people who are be interested in participating in something that we hope will emerge into a new monastic community. But we'll see. So the idea. So I've got an idea about. Well, I've kind of experimented on the world at the moment and trying out a new monastic course on everybody else. So I hope at some point that will then fine tune, possibly do one for ourselves on the ground for those who are interested. And also thinking about putting an advert around. I'm thinking lots of colleges and everything are away at the moment. Lots of people are away, and we don't know what's going to happen with a second wave with this COVID, which again might delay things. But I'm hoping that we might be able to try and have something online as a gathering of those interested who might be, you know, I would want to be slightly as boldened to say, who would be interested in exploring being part of a new monastic community for central London? Because there aren't many of them around anymore. Yeah, so a conversation, not expecting everybody to be arrived. So starting a conversation some point in September, possibly going into October. Harriet, did you have any questions?
No.
No, okay. Did what I say make sense, or is it all a bit, oh my God, what's he going on about?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Okay, good. Kim, Alan, Jennifer, do you want to ask any questions? Please do. Or Elsie, if she's there. I can't see you, Elsie, but I'm hoping you're there. I'm convinced that she is.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Elsie. Yeah. You have a question for us?
Just a simple one. I hope it's something, you know. Thank you. The visions that we have for Christ Church is quite creative and very good. And my question here is, we've got a lot of ideas that we would want to push forward in order to make Christ Church be what it used to be, or near to what it used to be. My question here is, as we are surrounded with commercial buildings, most of it is commercial, it's not official building, as you can see, new builds. How do we connect with residents? Because most of them are foreign residents, and you know, as you rightly said earlier on, it's only a handful of parishioners attend Sunday services. How do we connect with them to enable them to attend our services when they are in London or they are around, around their commercial residence? How do we do that? Because it's something that I don't know how we can do that, because majority of the buildings is commercially built for, not for communities, mainly for private. So I was just thinking, how would we do that?
Good question, Elsie. So let me reiterate. Well, I think the question is, and given the different types of residential accommodation, which is only a small amount given all the commercial space, how do we then connect those who live in the various spaces?
Yeah.
Near or close to the parish or in the parish? My immediate response is to learn from what other people have been doing. And one of the people that are on this subject I'm really interested in is what Gareth Powell did in Streatham. So he basically started with a vault of which would be called a cathedral anywhere else, which was completely empty and no one went to. And he took on a particular approach linked to festivals. And he literally worked with a company that flyed everything that moved, and actually managed to generate a really healthy connection to people who lived in the area. So there's a communications issue here about doing that well. We need to not only do we need to think about worship services, but actually what can we do to try and help build relationships with local people? I think that's the key thing. The modern world doesn't want to just go to worship services. It wants to feel like it belongs to some form of community, is what I think I'm hearing, or to engage with local activities. So I think we can learn from what other people have done. And one of those is forms of communication that draw people together, and there's new ways of doing that. So and one of the big thing I'm not sure, I think, Elsie, we think that everybody knows where Christchurch is. It amazes me from some of the research that people have no idea where Christchurch is, and they walk past it 1,000 times a week, and many of them don't see it, don't even know it's there. So how do we create the visibility? So we need to think about communications in terms of notice boards, not just websites, but put things up so people see it when they walk past it. And what can we do that's of such high caliber that people want to come back? So that's something we're going to have to particularly think about nearer towards Christmas, and using the seasons of Advent and all the rest of it to try and think about what could we do that's high end, that really does attract people and people would want to participate in. And I don't have all the answers to that, but I think we've got some dialogue partners to learn from what people have done that has worked. And we can try it out. I think the key thing here is we have to try a lot of things out, and some things will work and some things won't. And we'll focus on what does and then try to pursue them. I think that's the only way I know how to do this sort of fresh expression-y lark. And so, yeah, so hopefully what we will achieve is that firstly, that people will know where Christchurch is. 2, that there may be more interest in what we're doing. And 3, that from that, we might then start to build connections with new people. So but that's not going to be overnight. That's going to take a long time to do.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, do you want to say something as someone who works in a nearby area in terms of how you think what I've said relates to what you know, because you're one of those people who works in secular employment in the area? Anything you want to say?
Well, I don't work as near as would be ideal, because I work a bit more up towards Gray's Inn Road, but I know quite a lot of people who work closer, especially around the Temple area. I mean, I think it all sounds really good, especially, having flexibility around the involvement in the monastic community, and, not scaring people off too early, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the main thing from my perspective is that we just get on with marketing it, really, because I think if we have a few people who, even if we gave out lots of leaflets or something and only a few people came and were willing to kind of get involved on the periphery of the community at the beginning, then I think that it would be enough actually, because their involvement would bring in other people and it would be a starting point. Whereas I think the problem at the moment is that we don't really have people from the area, like who work in the area to start with. So we need to go it from seed, really.
Yeah. And I think there's some conversations I'm quite keen to have. So, for example, I would love, this is where John, in terms of what John does when he's not being a curate, is quite important. So, for example, there is the connection with some of the big organisations that have used the church for carol services. That we really get, that's a natural connection to start from in terms of exploring how we could support them. And particularly when I'm hearing around issues around well-being and spirituality is maybe a place to start, but we will see. Yeah.
I mean, I think the key thing, Ian, is for people who work in the area is being able to articulate it in a way that appeals to them and that they can understand. So, as you were saying, the new monastic label doesn't really mean anything to most people, and even things like spirituality, it can sound, to most people it's a bit like new agey or hippie beads kind of thing. So we need to find a way to say to people, look, if you're interested in this, it would involve making some sort of commitment, but it's a commitment that you wouldn't have to make necessarily at the very beginning till you knew a bit more about it. It would be something that's manageable for you, but also this in practical terms is the benefit that you would get out of it. So I think that's the challenge, really, how to get that across in a succinct way.
Yeah. And I don't have the answer to that. That's going to be something we're going to have to think about quite carefully. Yeah. So that I do think the one thing I do keep hearing are issues around well-being, and I think with the COVID has really strengthened that. So that is something we're going to need to really think about, because I think the uncertainty of the world and the fact that many people have been looking to the church to step up gives us an opportunity, but we just need to do that well. And in a way that relates to what people are interested in, rather than trying to, I think what we have to be careful with is this idea that suddenly loads of people are going to turn up and want to go to a worship service. It's not going to happen. We've got to try and support, how do we open up the Christian faith, the Christian path of life? And I think forms of contemplation and spirituality is going to be part of that journey, as well as what we do on Sunday morning. Yeah.
Ian?
Yeah.
In your ministry there, do you have many what are traditionally called hatch, match and dispatch? The weddings and the baptisms and the funerals?
As the new kid on the block, I don't know too much, but looking at some of the recent research, I think they've had some weddings. I don't think there's been any funerals from what I've seen, but but the one good thing about the Sunday morning thing, there is a number of younger people. So that is something, and that's the one thing we do need to think about. How can we use what we have to attract more of? And that's something we have to think about. So yes, there's not a lot of traditional ministry, but remember that the church has a background in industrial chaplaincy. And in a way, I'm thinking about, well, actually that shifted from an industry to offices and hotels. And we have to rethink about how do we reconnect with those who work. But as Lynette rightly pointed out, we can't just decide what that looks like, particularly in a situation when no one's working, very few people are working in the area. So that's something we're going to have to listen to constantly, and then work out how we respond to it as hopefully things change.
Yeah, I only mentioned hatch, match and dispatch because traditionally those are often used as an opportunity to follow up small families, small groups, and stay in touch. That's why. Yeah.
Well, one of the key things one of the first things I was trying to do when I first came to Christchurch with the agreement with the PCC was a focus on a come back to church Sunday. And unfortunately, the COVID kind of finished that off. So we have got a mailing list of people we've phoned who were quite interested. and then some sort of party. Unfortunately, we were unable to do that. So that would be a way in about trying to regenerate those who had a connection to the church. The greater challenge there is about how do we connect to those who have possibly a negative view of Christianity in the church. That's going to be the biggie. And how do we break that down to open up the kind of great strengths of the Christian faith to those who assume it hasn't got anything to offer. So that's something we're going to have to think through quite a lot. Kim, is there anything you want to say? You're being very quiet.
I think it's all a very good vision, and I think, you know, taking it at time and praying, you know, obviously so many wonderful things have happened. I've heard about what's happened at St. Luke's. After I knew about what was happening, I have had some links with them before. So, yeah, I've been asking a few people, and, you know, everyone is very happy with what happened. And I think when things start, there's all these thoughts about what happened before. And I haven't been largely involved with the church as I have at this time. But, yeah, I just prayerfully think that it's a very good vision. And I look forward to seeing how it opens up.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. And as I said, this is a big strokes strategy. The practicalities about what needs to happen is going to need a constant re-listening and a recalibration as we try to work out next steps. But I think we've got the big strokes in place to work out the what. It's going to be the how and the when are going to be the big issues. So we just have to, and I think I've got to keep patient with the world. It's you know, it's hard, you know, this is hard, and it's hard on the PCC, it's hard on the church, because we've gone from starting to having to pause quite a lot, to then discern what God is seeking us to do. So we keep listening, we keep praying, and importantly, we keep strategizing. I think that's the key thing, and then try to attend to what we can. So I think that's the best that we can do in this sort of COVID situation. But I do think I do feel quite certain that God is calling some form of Christian community, both dispersed and at some point residential, into the mix of Christchurch, Southwark. But to do that in a way that, as I've heard the voices, we don't want it to sound too much. We don't want it to sound exclusive. We don't want it to sound elitist. But there does need to be life at the heart of Christchurch. So there needs to be something living and breathing at the heart. Otherwise, it's just all a lot of stuff on a bit of paper. So, you know, how we make that life happen is going to be critical. So any final questions? Because I'm aware it's now 10 past and we will definitely finish in 5 minutes time. Any final questions or clarifications or anything anybody wants to say?
Sorry, for me, it was new when you said about John being 2 years. Is that his limit of time with us? Or what is that? Is it fluid or what happened?
I'm not sure I can answer that question, Kim, because it kind of depends. It depends. And given that, I have to say, good on John for coping with starting a curacy in the middle of a global pandemic. You know,
absolutely.
So in terms of what that looks like and how it develops, no one knows, other than I want to give John every opportunity to develop his skills to be an ordained minister in the Church of England. And
we only just about know that I'm being deaconed in 6 weeks, 8 weeks time. So the diocese doesn't really know the horizon that the church has now has shortened quite a lot when it comes to curates. So I guess, yeah, the plan is 2 or 3 years, but I guess we just have to be open to whatever happens.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly, Kim, my kind of assumption is that kind of period.
Yes, I see that. And then, of course, you go on to further your career, but it will be at least 2 years that you'll be with us. Do you think?
Who knows?
In principle, that's what it's supposed to be, right? But that's in principle.
I think I know why King asked that question, because really we've got a lot on the paper to do, and for Ian Wong to do it on his own. I don't think that could be possible for 2 years, you know, if John is going to remain with us for only 2 years. So I think Ian, we needed more than 2 years to be able to develop all these visions for that. I think I believe that's why I can ask question of that.
It's good to have
Yeah.
people who are working well. It's great, you know. But of course, I understand the Church of England and I understand what happens. I just think that it's great when you have someone who's part of the vision and everything, and of course Tobias too. It's great. It's really great, you know. Really, really great. So it's lovely to have that foundation.
I have the dream team, so I'm quite happy about that. So yeah, so how that develops, we'll see. But I want everybody to hear that the diocese and marshals are fully behind this being a long-term vision. You know, no one's expecting all this to fall in place in just a couple of years. It's going to take quite some time, and also it's going to take various rectors, not just me, but future ones, to own it as well. And not just to go off on some sort of tangent, but to be very focused on what this is all about. And the diocese, I think, and the reason why we're talking about having a bishop's mission order, which we haven't got time to talk about right now, but part of that is about making sure things keep focused and put the pressure on the diocese and also the patrons to keep focused on that as well. So that's why a BMO is quite important, to keep focused on the mission stuff that needs to be done. Okay. So
when will the decorating take place?
The decorating will take place as soon as the faculty has been awarded, and that's let's just say that process, which always takes much longer than I'm publicly prepared to make comments about, it will get sorted and it will be done. The marshals are committed to that. It just needs the rubber stamping from the diocesan, I forgot what it's called, but anyway, from the diocese to give the right committee to give that permission, and it will happen. So that don't worry about that, it will happen definitely. So yeah, there'll be more conversations. This is just the first one. If you'd like a copy of what I presented, I'm very happy to share that. PCC, we will be debating this soon. We will be talking about it as soon as possible. And please hear, this is just about clarity about next steps as we move forward. And I will also make sure this video of this recording, if you want to watch it again, you'll be able to do that through the website. So everybody, thank you for your time, and thanks for being here. And yeah, thanks for all that you're contributing. And let's keep going as we seek to develop Christchurch, Southwark, as a renewed place of ministry and mission as we look forward. So thank you for being here this evening. And let's all go and have a nice cold glass of water in the wonderful heat that is London at the moment. And also Texas, I believe, for we've got people here from all over the world. So good to see you all, and see you all very soon. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.